Hey everyone, author MJ Gallagher here, and I am back with a brand new video series presented and funded by KupoCon. My mission this time around is to scour the chapters of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and highlight some of the less obvious details and Easter eggs that you might have missed. This episode covers the first half of Chapter 1, it's self-titled Fall of a Hero. I'll be sure to keep spoilers beyond this part of the game to an absolute minimum, but please beware of likely spoilers right from the start for the original Final Fantasy VII, its remake, and the compilation in general. With that out of the way, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and let's get started. Unlike the game's demo that was released in mid-February 2024, Rebirth opens on the smouldering destruction of part of Midgar's upper city. This is different to how the metropolis looked when Cloud and the others escaped it at the conclusion of Remake, but it does correspond to scenes from within the Singularity, as briefly depicted during the initial recap. The news reporter states the devastation was caused by a massive tornado, and the footage of the fiery twister is reminiscent of those seen at the end of the original game, as Meteor approaches Midgar. This is significant given Sephiroth's apparent absorption and command of Meteor in the Singularity. The camera eventually draws back and passes a pair of billboards. One of these displays the same Terrier variant of stamp that appears on a chip bag during Remake's ending, representing an alternative existence in which Zack has not been killed. The other image is an advertisement for Benora White apple juice. The fruit, also known as dumb apples, is synonymous with Zack's story in Crisis Core, specifically with its antagonist Genesis. Speaking of Zack, the white feather drifting down towards he and Cloud is a deliberate contrast to the black feathers repeatedly shown in Remake. Where black feathers are used to represent Sephiroth in that game, white feathers are used to represent Zack's mentor Angeal in Crisis Core. The young soldier, who at the climax of Crisis Core is on his way to reunite with Aerith, arrives at Sector 5's Centre District. The aforementioned news broadcast is playing on the Jumbotron, which reflects Cloud and Aerith first entering Centre District in Remake, joining the gathered crowd to watch a report regarding the aftermath of the Mako Reactor 5 bombing. On screen, the reporter slips through the barricade for a better view of the destruction, and we hear a Shinra captain relaying intelligence that the missing suspect is an ex-soldier armed with a Buster Sword. According to Crisis Core, the Buster Sword was specially commissioned for Angeal by his stepfather, so the implication that there's more than one weapon is unique to Rebirth. The player is soon given control of Zack at the Sector 5 boundary wall, as he pursues the helicopter carrying Aerith. The location itself is remarkably similar to the outskirts of the Sector 7 slums where Yuffie enters the city in episode Intermission. I mentioned this in my Remake video series, but eagle-eyed fans may have noticed that the way Zack carries the Buster Sword is the reverse of Cloud. Here, the long edge of the blade is down his left side, while we'll later see that Cloud has the long edge on his right side. This is also true for the original Final Fantasy VII and Crisis Core respectively. On the other side of the wall, Zack races along a rocky path towards the helicopter's crash site. Along the way, he passes the wreckage of the Motor mobile weapon, known as Motorball in Final Fantasy VII, and also glimpsed in a Shinra hangar during Intermission. Motor, of course, careered off the unfinished expressway after its battle with Cloud in Remake's Chapter 18. Meanwhile, in the distance, a number of raised rock formations can be seen. It's likely one of these is where Zack died at the end of Crisis Core. Zack storms the crash site and takes on several Shinra troops. After dispatching the men, the hatch on an overhead B-09 helicopter opens and he is confronted by an additional 3 combatants. The circumstances parallel his last stand in Crisis Core, particularly the battlefield of burning choppers and slain infantrymen, and the final triad of opponents with air support from a B-09 craft. Zack's ultimate defeat in that title is portrayed through him being stripped of his key memories of Aerith. How fitting it is then that his victory here is rewarded with their reunion. The ex-soldier finds a hiding spot, and while he cradles Aerith, her white materia and pink ribbon drop from her unconscious hand. The imagery of the falling orb is deeply connected to the girl's fate in Final Fantasy VII, but the ribbon itself is a memento of her relationship with Zack. He bought it for her the first day they met. We then transition to where the demo starts. As in the original game, Cloud's retelling of the Nibelheim incident 5 years ago begins in the back of a Shinra army truck, where we see the 16-year-old soldier check in on the motion sickness of an infantryman colleague. If you look closely, you'll see some locks of blonde hair sticking out the back of the trooper's helmet, but that's probably not important. When Cloud asks Sephiroth to brief him on the assignment, he adds his concern that it may be another one of those Turks gigs. Sephiroth confirms that it is, which is a likely allusion to episode 12 of Before Crisis, where the player Turk is dispatched to the Mount Nibel reactor ahead of the survey team. The same scenario is referenced again if Cloud inspects the cat bowl at Tifa's house. In the present, Tifa mentions that her cat Fluffy was always disappearing. Chasing her pet up Mount Nibel is how she initially runs into the player Turk during Before Crisis, and is subsequently asked to be the investigation team's guide. The truck comes to a sudden halt when monsters are spotted on the road, prompting Sephiroth and Cloud to confront them. Rather than the dragon that features in the corresponding scene in Final Fantasy VII, the fiends are a pair of Disgorgons, previously known as Vulture Tasks, which are native to the rocket launch pad area on the other side of Mount Nibel. Sephiroth takes down both creatures with ease, finishing the second Disgorgon with an onslaught that includes leaping into the air and driving his sword, the Masamune, through it with a downward lunge. This exact move can be used as part of Sephiroth's in-battle skill set later in the chapter, and is known as Hell's Gate. Those familiar with the fight against him at the climax of Remake may recognise that it is deployed there too. As for its significance, the attack is arguably his most iconic, given the events at the Forgotten Capital in the original Final Fantasy VII, and the big question over what Aerith's fate will be at the end of Rebirth. In the present day, Tifa supplements the story's introduction from the perspective of Nibelheim's inhabitants. As she does so, she places a hand over her chest. This of course is where she was slashed by Sephiroth's Masamune and required a number of skin grafts, according to the official novel Traces of Two Pasts by Kazushige Najima. Once the Shinra survey team has arrived at Nibelheim, Cloud has the chance to explore his hometown. If you speak to one of the infantrymen at the gate, he'll ask if Cloud has a girlfriend he wants to see, then mentions a girlfriend of his own. Without getting into specifics, this is likely a reference to Tifa and Aerith respectively. Towards the town square, there is a group of children pretending to be Sephiroth taking on 3 opponents. Whenever the girl successfully defeats the others, she sings the traditional victory fanfare of the Final Fantasy series. This parallels Barret in Remake and Yuffie in Episode Intermission, who both do the same. On the subject of returning features, Rebirth's inventory section in the main menu has expanded on remakes. However, there's no change to the description of the Buster Sword, said to be a large broadsword that has inherited the hopes of those who fight. This is a clear allusion to its original owner Angeal, who regularly speaks in Crisis Core of the honour and dreams of a soldier, adding another layer of poignancy to the circumstances of Cloud's flashback, and mystery regarding the possibility of multiple weapons. The mandatory armour worn by Cloud during the flashback is the Road Warrior's bangle, whose description claims that it's a stylish leather accessory for bikers, available for purchase in the Cosmo Canyon region. This is interesting because it may connect to the route the investigation team came when travelling by road to Nibelheim. In addition, the defiles around Cosmo Canyon were one of the handful of tracks in the mobile battle racing game G-Bike, playable in Japan between 2014 and 2015. One of the coolest expansions in Rebirth's inventory is that items now have 3D models. The potions are of special mention because their glowing vial design is based on the limited edition potions that could be purchased from Square Enix during the Final Fantasy VII 10th anniversary celebration run. On a separate note, the backdrop of the menu screens appears to be from the Temple of the Ancients. The black panels behind Cloud resemble archaic astronomy charts, showing the known orbits of planets or other celestial objects. This may relate to the temple itself being the black materia in the original game, whose magic is said to locate and collide with small planetoids floating in space. In other words, the summoning of Meteor. As I discuss extensively in my book Norse Myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII, several elements of Nibelheim's design are derived from Viking legends. This is reinforced in the flashback. One example is that the inn has been renamed as the Nidhogg Hotel, while another is that the foremost river flowing past the town is called the Gunthra. In Norse mythology, Nidhogg is the name of a dragon who dwells in the main spring of Niflheim, and is associated with the torment of murderers and oath-breakers, perhaps foreshadowing the actions of its current guest, Sephiroth. Gunthra, meanwhile, is an icy river whose source is that same primordial spring. Behind the reception desk of the hotel is a tourism poster advertising the famous ruby red rocks of Corel. A closer inspection shows the rocks create the illusion of the ruby weapon, an optional super boss from the original Final Fantasy VII that is fought in the Corel Desert. Tifa's martial arts instructor, Zangen, who we now know as Rashard Zangen, is subtly referenced a couple of times in Final Fantasy VII Remake, but he properly introduces himself to Cloud at the hotel by examining the boy's biceps and grabbing his waist. Clasping Tifa's upper arms without permission is exactly what Zangen does when he first meets her too, causing her to suspect him of being a trafficker, as revealed in Traces of Two Pasts. Speaking of Najima-san's novel, the early part of this chapter is crammed full of references. We get to see the sparring equipment Tifa uses when she's training with her father, Mayor Xander and the town hall, including the terminal operated by designated council members to communicate with the Shinra Company, the Nibelheim Watch, set up after the sudden increase in monster sightings, and even the makeshift kitchen in the town square, where local women are preparing meals for those on patrol shifts. It's worth highlighting that cured ham sandwiches are explicitly mentioned by Tifa in the book, eaten by her and her friends on playdates when they were kids. The family of one of the kids, Tyler, is known to have the best cured meat recipe in town. This is why both Mrs. Tyler and Playdates, which Cloud never went on incidentally, are referenced when he munches on the pork sandwiches. Arguably the best allusion to Traces of Two Pasts is the Calisthenics Club, where elderly townsfolk improve their physical and mental health through stretching. Zangen introduced the exercises to Nibelheim, but the group is usually led by Tifa. If Cloud joins the gathering after speaking with Zangen and climbing the water tower, it is the martial arts master himself who leads the stretches. The poses include the Seraph, the Stone Bird, and the Scales of Justice, whose techniques, but not names, are all described in the novel. The Seraph is of particular interest because seraphim in ancient Judeo-Christian literature are typically six-winged angelic beings associated with burning. Given that Sephiroth's final form in the original Final Fantasy VII was seraph-like, this could also foreshadow him setting Nibelheim ablaze. Alternatively, it may not be a coincidence that the statue of a female angel, two stone eagles, and the painting of a lady with scales are all present in the main hall of Shinra Manor. Paintings feature prominently in the homes and buildings around Nibelheim, with almost every one containing artwork of flowers. Flowers are hugely symbolic in Remake, and it's unsurprising to see a single yellow lily on the mailbox outside Tifa's house during Cloud's flashback. He gives her a similar flower outside 7th Heaven in Chapter 3 of Remake, representing the reunion of loved ones. When it comes to Easter eggs, Tifa's bedroom has more than its fair share. The boots by the desk match those in her apartment at Stargazer Heights during Remake. On the shelf by the door is the model of a Shinra infantryman, which is a really weird thing to have for a girl who loves a boy that joins Soldier. There's definitely nothing important about that either. Later in Rebirth, it's also heavily implied these figurines are based on the original 135th Soldier collectibles found in Junon. Cloud gets a telling off by Tifa and Aerith in the present for trying to open her wardrobe, which is a callback for being able to take the girl's orthopedic underwear in the old game. And the poster above the piano includes some dolphins and the silhouette of Zell from Final Fantasy VIII. The relevance here is that both Tifa and Zell are the monk-type fighter in their respective titles. Furthermore, Zell's Dolphin Blow limit break in Final Fantasy VIII pays homage to Tifa's limit break by the same name, and both include dolphins as part of the attack. The next morning, as Cloud approaches the waiting Sephiroth, Tifa's dad and Mayor Xander can be heard arguing in the background. Xander twice calls him Brian, despite the name never appearing as an identifier on screen. According to Tetsuya Nomura, Brian Lockhart has been Tifa's dad's name since the development of the original game in the 1990s, but this was only revealed in the Ultimania publications many years later. It's tricky to spot in this cutscene, but Tifa has a thin leather cord tied around her left forearm. The makeshift bracelet was a gift from Zangan for her 15th birthday, and it becomes an important symbol for controlling her emotions in Traces of Two Pasts. The first fiends that the investigation team encounter on Mount Nibel's trailhead are insectoid chimeras, giant arthropods with the heads and appendages of a mantis, butterfly, bee and centipede. These monsters do actually feature in the old Final Fantasy VII, but are instead local to Zack's hometown of Gallagher, and are mistranslated as Chimera bugs in the English version of the game. However, they appear in significant numbers on Mount Nibel during the Before Crisis episode I referenced previously, and are explicitly mentioned in Traces of Two Pasts, albeit they are called Chimera bugs in the book too. Even in this early part of Rebirth, the extent of the world building is astonishing. And despite how self-contained the whole sequence is, there are still opportunities to glimpse the sheer scope of the Nibel region. One such example is on the rope bridge above the Gunthra River, offering a panoramic view of the town and even the huge red mushroom top of a moghouse. During the Nibelheim flashback of the old game, Cloud is equipped with a single orb of materia. This was preemptive materia, which helped him to sneak up on Sephiroth at a critical moment in the story. In Rebirth, however, the player can discover various new spheres on the mountain trail and experiment with their many combinations. Among these are the Comet materia and Level Boost materia, which can be paired to grant Cloud access to the upgraded Meteor spell. Given the context of the chapter, this may be another allusion to Sephiroth's eventual quest to acquire the Black Materia and summon Meteor. And finally, I spoke earlier about the significance of Sephiroth's iconic attack, Hell's Gate. The soldier legend becomes playable again after the team falls into the Gunthra, with the first battle, and thus the first opportunity to utilise the attack, taking place outside the cave opening to the Nibelheim ravine. In Norse mythology, the underworld of Hell is located in the primordial realm of Nibelheim. Like its counterpart in ancient Greek lore, the entrance to the underworld is guarded by a hellhound called Garm, who serves a similar function to the classical Cerberus, a beast whose name, incidentally, is closely associated with another of Nibelheim's famous inhabitants. Garm is said to be stationed and fettered at the cave of Nibelheim, making this the third direct reference to Niflheim that appears in Rebirth's Chapter 1, alongside the Nidhogg Hotel and the Gunthra River. Furthermore, given that Nibelheim is situated at the entrance to the Norse underworld, it is quite literally Hell's Gate, bringing us right back to Sephiroth. Well folks, that's all for now. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I invite you to check out all future episodes on KupoCon's channel. If you're interested in the lore side of things, my own books, Norse myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII and Greek myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII, are both available on Amazon. I'd especially like to thank all of KupoCon's Patreon subscribers for your continued support. Without your generosity, productions such as this would not be possible. And if you're not already a patron, please do consider contributing to the cause. But for now, take care. I'm MJ Gallagher, and I'll speak to you again soon.